But I do want to touch on this with Dr. Kevin Campbell, the K-Rock Consulting President, CEO, cardiologist by training. As a cardiologist, doctor, what is the issue here with these youths? Is it a big one? Is it a worrisome one? What?
You know, it's actually pretty small. Myocarditis is a fancy word for inflammation of the heart muscle and potentially the sac around the heart. It occurs very, very rarely in the general population. And in fact, in those who have received a second vaccine of either the Moderna or Pfizer, we see it in a little bit higher rate than the general population might expect. But again, all of these cases have been self-limited. Almost all of them had full recovery, and the risk of myocarditis is not greater than the risk of COVID based on the available data.
You know, people are going to hear this sort of thing, Doctor, particularly young people who are resistant to getting the vaccine in the first place, say that that's another reason why I should. What do you tell them?
You know, myocarditis, first of all, is in the cases that we've seen, and again, this is about 16 cases per million doses of a second vaccine in just the 16 to 39-year-old age group, that this is pretty darn rare. And in all of these cases, with rare exception, almost all have fully recovered after going to the emergency room, or maybe the average hospitalization was 3 days. I still think getting a vaccine makes more sense. I advise my friends and colleagues the same thing. I have a 20-year-old that was vaccinated, and I think the benefit of the vaccine outweighs any remote risk. And the American Heart Association agrees with me there.
Now, what about leaving it at one vaccine shot? You know, not the J&J, which is a one-shot deal, but would you advise those young people who had one shot to leave it at that?
Absolutely not. We know from the data, particularly you were just discussing the Delta variant, that those that have 2 doses of either Moderna or Pfizer seem to be pretty well protected against the Delta variant. However, those that only get 1 dose, they tend to have, it's about 60% effective, which is just not enough. This COVID is no joke. It is killing people. It is killing young people, old people. And I think that the risk of myocarditis, which is short-lived and in most cases that we've seen is quite treatable and reversible, doesn't justify missing a dose.
We talked a little bit about this Delta variant, or you did, inciting these concerns that are building. They represent 20% of the new cases being recorded in this country. Dr. Fauci says it's a big worry to him. Is it a big worry to you?
So what we've found, as I had said, is our vaccine that we've all had now seems to be pretty darn effective, 88 to about 92% effective against the Delta variant. Now, that Delta variant, what it's going to do is the folks who've chosen not to get vaccinated, I think you're going to see major outbreaks in concentrations and cities where we don't have high rates of vaccination. So in that respect, I am worried. Again, the unvaccinated is what worries me, and I think we've done a pretty good job of getting folks vaccinated. Now we need to figure out how to get the holdouts to get vaccinated.
You know, you hear anecdotally, doctor, about those who have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the 2 shots, what have you, and then getting COVID themselves. I believe in Massachusetts, 4,000 such individuals. None of it appears to be overly worrisome, and their cases appear, at least at first blush, to be mild. But what do you make of that? Is that, small as it is, a possibility?
No, we do see cases of reinfection in vaccinated people, but what we know is it's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage, number one. Number two, because you're vaccinated, your body can already respond to that virus and tends to fight it off a lot more efficiently. So we see the cases be much milder. We do know from all the data we see in those cases, they typically are not hospitalized. They're not dying of COVID. So I think it's akin to the flu. Remember, the flu shot is not nearly as effective as the COVID shot is. It's around 60 to 80%, depending on the strain. And we see that people who do get a flu shot have a less severe disease, often don't, end up in the hospital with influenza pneumonia. So I would think of it that way. Vaccine is absolutely critical to protecting yourself and your family.
Thank you, doctor. Appreciate hearing all of that. You're a very steady guide for us, especially, TV anchors who tend to freak out like, oh, I don't know, me. All right. Thank you again. In the meantime, just as the doctor is wrapping